Good morning, everyone. And we will call the Friday meeting of the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri back into order. And as a matter of a personal privilege, I would like to do something very special before we get started here. Cindy Van Tyne, could you come forward, please?
Yes.
Stand over here. Many of you here know Cindy, but some of you may not. But for 34 years, she has been the director of events here at UMSL, and many of us and all of us who've gotten to know her appreciate so much the great work you've done. And 34 years, that's a long period of time, and your service has been so valuable to UMSL, but to the university. So we want to thank you and wish you the very best in your retirement.
Thank you so much.
First item on the agenda is to hear from our Chancellor at UMSL, Dr. Tom Charge. Tom?
Thank you, Chairman Graham, and thank you to the board and Mr. President that we can host you here at the University of Missouri St. Louis. It's always very exciting when the Board of Curators comes to town, and the students, the faculty, the staff, our community leaders are thrilled that you're here. And the session we just had is a great example of what we're all about here at the university. And it's all about students. It's all about student success, and certainly you saw that at our breakfast meeting. What I like to do is go through a few highlights of the University of Missouri St. Louis. This is going to be an upbeat talk, not a downbeat talk. And there's so much upbeat to talk about, so I'm having a lot of fun with this. Let me just start by saying that our kind of theme throughout all this is excellence. And we have a lot of excellent programs at the university, whether it's in academic quality, whether it's in research, or some interface with a service component. Just some examples that just come to mind. Business, and you heard from our student athletes, and one of the reasons they came to the university was because of the reputation in business, international business accounting and so forth, criminology, education, nursing, psychological sciences, and also in terms of research. Biochemistry, biotechnology cuts across two different departments, clinical psych, criminology, again, conservation biology. Our Missouri Institute of Mental Health is headquartered right here on the campus. Outstanding research and outstanding programs. We also get that corroborated by national publications. So, for example, we're all familiar with the U.S. News and World Report. They do rank institutions as a whole, but they also go in and rank programs or give you categorization of programs. So, for example, in their so-called best list, we have biology. We've got chemistry, clinical psychology, nursing, psychology, public affairs, social work, all classified according to U.S. News and World Report in what's called the best list. We also have a publication called Best Value Colleges. We rank 5th nationally for adult learners. And this is looking at the percentage of students above 25. The average age of our student body actually is 28. Retention, graduation rates, academic quality. Another publication called Business Insider has named UMSL #1 in Missouri for educational value. This is based on affordability and academic rankings, actually academic rankings from U.S. News and World Report. Forbes magazine says we're one of America's best colleges because of the quality of our teaching, great career prospects, graduation rates, and low levels of debt. Our online nursing program, going from the RN to the BSN, and the success rate in doing that was ranked among the top 50 nationally by 2 digital publications, RN to BSN and Value Colleges. And the College of Education performs extremely well in various reviews, 2 that I've listed here. Our teacher prep programs earning top ratings by the Missouri Department of Education's annual performance report, and the National Council on Teacher Quality, which places our secondary teacher prep program among the top 10% nationally. We have an outstanding College of Education. We just appointed a new dean, Ann Taylor, so congratulations to Ann. And international business, consistently ranked in the top 25, has been as high as in the top 8. And it's for programs that they conduct overseas and bringing students from overseas to our programs. And in some cases, we have dual degree programs, such as with Nanjing University in China. We're a gold standard, if you will, for how we treat our veterans. We have about 430 to 440 veterans on campus. We have a Center for Military Studies. We have a Department of Military Science. Military Times has named UMSL to its Best for Vets list for the 4th consecutive year. And Heath McClung, a picture of him, he was selected as the 2017 Pat Tillman Scholar, a national recognition, and congratulations to him. And he's on our engineering program that we do cooperatively with Washington University. Our total enrollment has hung steady around between 16,700 to about 17,000, which includes our dual credit students. Students in the high school taking our courses, about 6,000 of them. Degree-seeking students, we're running around 11,000 students. Our student total credit hours, it's on campus, it's flat. Off campus, which is a smaller component, down 4%. Overall, down just only 1% in total student credit hours. The quality and quantity of our incoming freshman class keeps getting better. We're getting those numbers back up, so we had 11% increase in our first-time freshmen this year. This is the highest average ACT we've ever had, 24.4. I've shown you a 5-year running average here. But with this average ACT just keeps going up, and we're not actually consciously trying to raise it. It's just that that's the way it's happening, and we're very proud of that. Our student, I'm not going to spend time on this slide because you just heard all about it from our faculty athletic rep, but let me say I'm so proud of our victory last night over number 20 William Jewell. So John Sunvold, you've got to come to all of our games because you were there that got us that victory, and the women won too. So both the women and the men, and we have a net very strong winning percentage, and so great to our student reps, student athletes, and also for the service component they do. I've mentioned this before to you. There's what I call input measures and output measures. Input measures are enrollment. I mean, we want enrollment for certainly budgets. We want enrollment for a variety of reasons. But really what counts is the students that you graduate. And our percentage of graduates is going up. Our graduation, 6-year graduation rate is now pushing 60%. That's up over the last 3 or 4 years. We were down as low as 41%. So we've made some dramatic increases. We also, for the 3rd year in a row, have topped 3,000 graduates. We're going to have another set of ceremonies later this month, actually next weekend. I think 1 or 2 of you are going to be at that. And we're very proud of that. And that's something we're pushing hard. It's been part of our current strategic plan, which is just ending. But the very, very key to that was getting more students that are graduating, and that's what we're getting, more students graduating. It fits in with what's happening in the St. Louis region. The regional chamber has a program that they want to get 85,000 more graduates, either 2-year or 4-year in the St. Louis region, and we're certainly key to that. And a big component of ours is going to be adults coming back. We're trying to tap into different kinds of markets. Financially, we're very stable. We had some challenges about 2 years ago. We had revenues and expenditures which were not matching. We've got them matching. We actually finished the last fiscal year with a surplus, and we're on target to do that again this fiscal year. We're also working hard on grants and contract sponsored programs. We heard from Mark McIntosh yesterday. We had a dip down, and you just look federally. I mean, the NSF budget is down going into next fiscal year, but we've gone 16 million, 18 million, 20 million. My vice provost for research tells me we're probably going to hit 22 million next year. So we're going in the right direction, and hopefully we can start getting back to the levels that we should be at. We've been very generous. Well, we've been the recipients of generosity for donors, particularly in private fundraising, and our average over the last 5 years has been over 26 million. When I arrived here In 2003, we were doing about $7 million a year. And by a series of investments, because you have to make investments to make money, we added people in marketing, added people in development, advancement, and we're now holding steady at 26, 27 million. And hopefully we can get that eventually up to 30 million and higher. One year we did hit 31 million. What we're tapping into now, I should mention, is in 20 years ago, if you looked at our giving pattern, corporations gave about 75% of the donations. Individuals was about 25%. This should be reversed. Most very successful fundraising programs have a lot more individuals contributing, and we're starting to go in that direction now. Also, we're only 54 years old, so we've not had an alumni base with wealth to give back. We now do. So we're tapping into alums, not just here in the St. Louis region, but across the country. So we're poised to really take off now in this particular arena. Just give them some examples of people. We have couples now that are giving $5 million or more, and just give an example of 2 couples that are here. We opened up a new home for our College of Business Administration, and that is the 4th building that in the last 3 years, we've built a lot of buildings. We've got about $150 million of capital construction over the last 2 to 3 years. This particular building for business administration is called Anheuser-Busch Hall because of a lead gift from Anheuser-Busch. We did get $10 million from the state, $10 million of private fundraising. This is the only building actually where we got dedicated state support of all of our buildings. So we're kind of doing, I call it bootstrap financing. We find ways of pulling ourselves up and to get the job done. We're very innovative here at the University of Missouri St. Louis. The headquarters of Express Scripts right on our campus is a great example of innovation. And I think part of it is our youth, that we can kind of turn on a dime, and you have to sometimes turn on a dime. We started something recently called UMSL Accelerate, and this focuses on new courses, new internships. It's a kind of new mindset on and off campus. This was made possible with a seed gift from Express Scripts, and then what we've done is taken off on this by partnering with Amaran Accelerator. And Amaran Accelerator is they actually are, I guess you might think of them as the first client for UMSL Accelerate. And we partnered also with Capital Innovators. That's a national organization. We're located centrally at Cortex, which is an entrepreneurship region, if you will, started with us, WashU, St. Louis University, BJC. And this is probably the first accelerator that deals with energy and power, and it's a partnership, again, with Amaran. Amaran, the CEO of Amaran, is one of our alums, Warner Baxter, and we're very excited that he can do that with us. Part of the investments they're making an initial investment of $1 million, is taking 7 grants of $100,000 to people around the world. We had 200 applicants from 30 countries, and they picked 7. And I'll just give you one example. One example is Wi-Fi PLU. It's from England, and it's a smart plug. And with this smart plug, you can hold a mobile, you can either use it from an app, or you can talk into it, and you can turn off your toaster halfway around the world. Now, that's maybe a small little convenience, but there's a lot more you can do beside toasters. Very exciting technology, something that fits right in with the vanguard, if you will, of power and energy, which Amaran's all about. I think all of you now have seen our new patient care center started by the College of Optometry. I know that the new curators in our tour on Wednesday had a chance to see it. We have a lot of clinical work, a lot of instruction going on there in optometry, but we've also partnered with SSM in the area, and they now have some family medicine practice going on there, OBGYN, diagnostics. So it's a much needed healthcare center right here in North County, right next to Ferguson. We recognize the importance of getting more people back to the university, and we've just launched a program called NOW. It's an acronym. It stands for Nights, Online, and Weekends. And we're making more investments now in that arena. We want to bring more people back. We used to have an evening college, which did more of this. We disassembled the evening college and decentralized it. And, when I look back on it, it probably was not the best move. And we're trying to centralize again in that arena because, we want to increase more and more on that convenience factor, if you will, for people, including particularly the online components. The climate survey. We all took part in the climate survey. On balance, the results came out well. I mean, in our campus, and it's similar with the other campus, 75% were comfortable or very comfortable with the overall climate on campus. 84% were comfortable or very comfortable with the classroom climate. What we're doing now is focusing on that other 25%, that other 16% that express concerns. And we have a Chancellor's Cultural Diversity Council. It's chaired by Deborah Burris and one of our faculty members. And in fact, we're meeting this afternoon to look right at this climate survey and how we can respond as a campus to the concerns that were raised. And with that, I'd like to cue a video, if we will, if we could do that, which looks at, we call it the one word. When you think of UMSL, what's the one word that comes to mind?
You may already know that the University of Missouri-St. Louis is the largest public research university in eastern Missouri, that our beautiful 470-acre campus is a hub of innovation, that we provide excellent learning experiences and leadership opportunities. You may already know that Forbes magazine named us one of America's best colleges, or that Business Insider ranked us #1 in Missouri for affordability. All of this is true. And yet, at UMSL, more than anything, it's the people that make the difference. Over the last year, we asked the UMSL community to describe, in just one word, the kind of people who choose the University of Missouri-St. Louis. At first, it was a bit of a challenge.
Just one word?
Does a hyphen mean it's one word or two words?
Can I use all caps?
But once the answers started, they just kept coming. Over 1,000 of them.
Welcoming people choose UMSL.
I chose ambitious because I feel like most of the students, and if not all the students here at UMSL, have some kind of motivation to better themselves or change lives.
I chose the word inclusive because for the first time in my life, when I came to UMSL, I did not feel judged.
Faculty, staff, students, we're all motivated to succeed.
I chose compassionate because there are a lot of big hearts here on campus.
I chose resilient because life knocks everyone down, but people at UMSL get right back up.
I chose empowering because our UMSL students come from all walks of life. You could have a mom with 2 kids, first-generation college student. It doesn't really matter, and they're all here to succeed.
Committed.
Bold.
Successful.
Driven.
In fact, the #1 word?
Diverse.
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 You are also dedicated, determined, inspiring, and much, much more. You are UMSL.
And you've got a mug at your table which kind of reflects this one-word branding that we have. My last slide is a happy picture of opening day of classes. I mean, we really delivered this year because the students had an eclipse on their first day of class, and it couldn't be more exciting than a total eclipse of the sun. And with that, that's my report. Thank you very much.
Any questions of Tom or comments? Tom, we do want to thank you for your hospitality and
The question was, where can we find the video?
I'm
Bob, where
sorry.
can they find the video?
Well, it's online. Copies if you want.
Well, it's a great video. This is the second time I've seen it. It's a great video.
Yeah, we showed it at Founders Day as well.
Yes. If there are no other questions, Tom, thank you, and
Thank you.
appreciate your hospitality. Next item on the agenda is to call upon Dr. Moon Choi, who will present his president's report, and I think you're going to do it from here, right?
Yes, I'll do it from here. Good morning. It's great to be back at UMSL, and we had a chance to meet with some outstanding student athletes this morning. And it reinforces why we are in public higher education. Just tremendous students and very dedicated faculty. Let me share with you a slide that I present to legislators and also the public when I visit people throughout the state. And it shares the value of higher education and also the value of public higher education that is research inspired. And if you look at this slide, for the population with just a high school degree in 2016, the average earning was about $700. And the unemployment rate is 5.2%. But for those who have a bachelor's degree, the earnings on a weekly basis is about $1,200, and the unemployment rate is 2.7%. So this really signifies not only the personal value that a university education provides, but also the economic vitality to the region that is made possible by a public research university like the University of Missouri. So we're very pleased to share this, and I get a lot of comments back sharing that this is the first time that they've seen in graphical form the value of higher education. So this is something that we have to share more and more, not only with the legislators, but also with the public, to share our value to the state. We're also very pleased to have some outstanding faculty members at the University of Missouri system. And what you see are the 6 new members that were elected as fellows of AAAS. AAAS is the largest scientific organization in the world. And as you can see, this is a very diverse group and represents faculty members from all of our campuses. In this particular case, Mizzou and SNT. But these 6 fellows also joined 40 other fellows who have been elected in previous years. So we're very proud of their accomplishments. Recently, Gary Ward and the 4 chiefs of police convened a summit to talk about security and safety at our campuses. They brought in experts from University of Florida, as well as experts from Virginia Tech, to talk about the lessons that they learned, especially after the 2007 deadly shooting at the Virginia Tech campus, but more recently in Florida, when they had a gathering of both the alt-right as well as the Antifa movement that came to a head. So the best lessons that we learn and the best practices really do have to inform our approach for public safety. And it's very critical for all of us to have a system-wide approach when it comes to modernizing our update system, especially the rave updates, but also our facilities, as well as our training policies. So we're very happy about this output. I want to talk a little bit more about the highlights from the campuses. And as you know, Chancellor Cartwright joined the university about 100 days ago. And during his first 100 days, he's launched 5 very specific student scholarships, as well as cost reduction strategies. With these programs in place, we know that students who are going to attend Mizzou next year are going to have a lower cost of attendance. And this is something that we promote and something that we're going to be introducing at other campuses to ensure that our students have access to high quality as well as affordable education. When it comes to leadership changes, I don't know if Garnet Stokes is in the room, but Garnet Stokes, who currently serves as provost at University of Missouri Columbia, has been selected to begin her term in March as the president of University of New Mexico. So even though she's not here, let's give her a big round of applause. Also, Pat Oker has been selected as the permanent dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'd like to say that Pat Oker is the most powerful dean of College of Arts and Sciences. And the reason I say that is she is a triathlete, and she's also a power lifter. So she's going to do a great job because there's going to be a lot of important work that we do at the university to increase research and student success. In terms of the UMKC highlights, Professor Jeffrey Price, currently, who is a professor of biological sciences at UMKC, is on his way to Stockholm. Now, unfortunately, he's not receiving the Nobel Prize, but his work, while he was a postdoc with Professor Michael Young at Rockefeller University, has resulted in the 2017 Nobel Prize that investigates circadian rhythms. Also, I had the pleasure of attending Crescendo, and this is a tremendous event that features the best of our work in the conservatory. And during the past 5 years, they were able to raise about $1.5 million. For Missouri S&T, I'm very pleased to report that in 2017, their team finished #1 in the world for the Mars Rover. And this is a project where the students conceive, design, and build and test, and also compete in a national and international competition. We're very proud of that. Also, the University Research Center at Missouri S&T has finished what is considered to be one of the best university transportation centers, in which they use robotics and UAVs not only to inspect but also repair infrastructure such as roads and bridges. And this partnership also leads a consortium of universities from Georgia to Nevada to New York State. And this project also is really a very important precursor for the future investments that are going to be made in infrastructure from the federal government. In terms of UMSL highlights, I know that Tom George talked about the accelerator, but I want to feature the last item, which talks about the cybersecurity. As we talk about big data, analytics, and also the security of our computing systems, whether it's for defense purposes or financial purposes, it's important for us to make investments that create not only the teaching opportunities, but also research opportunities. And in this regard, UMSL is one of the few universities in the country that's been designated by both the NSA and the DHS as a center of excellence for cybersecurity. And this is the type of activity that we would love to see all of the campuses come together to develop a center of excellence that infuses the capabilities from all 4 campuses. And as we move forward, we know that growth in research for our 4 public research universities is going to be a critical factor. The last topic that I want to talk about really is a very important topic that defines the future of the University of Missouri. As many of you know, support for higher education is undergoing very dramatic changes. In response, the University of Missouri must implement new business models to reinvest and also grow the priorities in research, student success, and engagement. In June of this year, with a lot of hard work with the general officers and the curators, we announced both long and short-term cuts that resulted in about $100 million of reallocations. The guiding principles that we used for this process was to support excellence in our academic priorities. Shortly thereafter, we launched an administrative performance and process improvement project with PwC. The update you'll receive from PwC and my colleagues after my remarks examines the key administrative functions and also identifies areas for improvements. The results of this assessment provide us with directions to change the way our administrative functions operate. The university leaders fully endorsed this report. This report was reviewed and supported by teams of faculty and staff throughout the UM system. The findings and recommendations from this report, which focused on Mizzou and the UM system office, will also be integrated with work already underway at UMKC, S&T, and at UMSL. The next steps include performing an activity analysis for staff across all UM systems to quantify the division of labor and identify where consolidations can occur. The results of the data analysis and the specific actions to be taken will be provided by early summer of 2018. And throughout this process, faculty and staff and the curators will continue to provide input. As part of this very important assessment, we are also examining the appropriate operating model for administrative functions at the UM system and the 4 campuses. There are 2 models that are going to be presented. One, which is the core management model, involves a larger central organization at the UM system that will be involved in numerous levels of campus decisions and operations. The other, strategic management model, involves a smaller central organization at the system that coordinates important decisions to develop collaborations and efficiencies and accountability. As part of this study, we will determine which model best fits our needs, or a combination of the two models depending on the functions in question. So to conclude, we understand the opportunities outlined in the report will require a lot of hard work and very determined approaches. But we are committed to using data to help inform our decisions. And also, we are also very deeply committed to transparency, accountability, and collaboration by working with all of the faculty and staff at the campuses and the curators. So I look forward to the report, and that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Do we have questions of Dr. Choi?
If I could
Yes.
briefly, Dr. Choi, as we go through, and we're going to see this in the PwC report, the appropriate operating model, which I think gets to the core of a question that I've been discussing and that the whole board has been discussing. What do you see as the board's role in this discussion, and how can the board help drive whatever change that we collaboratively, and not just the presidency and the board, but in working with the university, how can we drive that implementation and that final decision?
So understanding the value of shared governance, I believe that the board's role is very critical, but I believe that bringing in the faculty and the staff who are going to be implementing the majority of the work as part of this new model for the system is going to be key. So I think having the discussions early about what the expectations are from the board and discussing that with the campus communities would be the best approach. And thus far, we've had that approach with the faculty and the staff. And we believe that we now have a model to present to you, to the board, that we believe will be very effective. With those two different models, one is the core management, the other strategic management, I believe that depending on the function, whether it's shared services or academics, that we can use a combination of the two. It doesn't have to be an either or. So I think we should be open to that discussion.
I have a question. Am I on?
You're
on. Listening to the students this morning, which was really inspiring. Some of them are attracted because of the sports programs, some because of particular academic interest, which is an area of excellence here at UMSL, and some of them because of the affordability of going here as opposed to private schools or more elite schools. And the top of your last topic here is less state support, more competition for students. What do you think the keys are to attaining that sweet spot between being elite and yet being accessible, given the dynamics of how we finance? Can you share your views on that?
Yes, and it's going to be a complex process for us to achieve higher quality with less state support and provide more affordability. The reason being is that when we compare ourselves to other universities that we aspire to, like the University of Illinois, they have an overall higher tuition. But for students who come from Pell-eligible families, the cost of education is lower because the additional tuition resources that is received by the university is reallocated to support students with the greatest need. And if we look at the University of Illinois, the average SAT or average ACT is probably about 29, much higher than any of our universities. But for students that have the highest need, their average tuition for those students is about $7,000 compared to $12,000 for our university. So careful management of the tuition resources that come in and strong state support can provide that kind of an opportunity. That's what we aspire to, but continued cuts have hurt us. Now we have to think about what are the ways that we can be more efficient in our operations so we can reallocate those for student needs as well as our faculty research.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, for the first time this year, we have had at each of our regular Board of Curators meeting a critical issues discussion, trying to address critical issues that are of a great importance to the system and to the 4 campuses. And this morning we have with us Vice President of Finance, our CFO, Ryan Rapp, and Margaret Stover of PricewaterhouseCoopers, who will present the critical issues discussion for this meeting. Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman Graham. I'll get it started, and then we'll turn it over to PricewaterhouseCoopers. But before I do that, I first just want to thank President Choi for leading this important initiative. Also, I want to say a special thanks to the governance, advisory, and work teams that we had faculty and staff representation. So especially for our faculty and staff members, Jerry, Camilla, Ashley, and Chrissy, thank you again. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Gary Allen, Gary Ward, Patty Haber-Berger, Marcia Fisher, Rhonda Gibler, for their leadership on this project. But finally, I want to really thank our work team, and that was led by Eric Vogelweid and Katie Lockwood, along with our partners in PwC. We wouldn't be here today without the work that they've put into this over the last couple of months. So with that, I'll go through a couple of slides that provide some context. It's not meant to depress anyone, but I think some of it is sobering about some of the challenges as we look forward. But I think if you look at this, you can see that there is a roadmap and a path forward. If we look at this slide, I just want to focus on, as we think about where we're headed, we're really focused on the bottom right box here as it relates to operational efficiency. But as we think of kind of these 4 key platforms, we see those as the ones that really drive what supports the strategic themes that the President has talked about. But I just want to be clear, as we go through this today, we're really focused on operational efficiency, but we'll also draw some parallels why just that platform alone isn't enough to achieve what we want. So on these next couple of slides, I'm just going to provide some background as to why we are doing this. I want to clarify that we're not doing this because we want to be the best at administration. We're doing this because we want to be able to drive resources into the mission central activities of the university. We believe if we can do that, that provides what's best for our students, what's best for our faculty, and what's best for the state. But as we think about public higher education, we know that the historical funding model for public higher education across the country is under stress, and it is changing. 2 of our most important resources that really drive our funding model are state appropriations and tuition. But I think we have to be prepared for what we're facing. We understand that it's one of our most important sources of revenue, but I think as we look forward, as you can see, we have to be prepared that we will not be seeing significant increases. This has been highlighted by recent reports by Moody's, and this isn't just unique to Missouri. As they look across the country, they don't see state support for public higher education increasing for a number of reasons: competition for resources and in other areas. I think it was just actually earlier this week, much of this was reaffirmed by Moody's. They put out a report that actually changed their outlook on higher education from stable to negative, and actually reinforced both of these themes. So as we think about tuition and fees, I think the other thing we have to think about as we move to our other primary revenue source, they're looking at this and we should be planning on subdued growth. We'll have limited increases, and that's largely going to be driven by a highly competitive environment. And at the same time, enrollment growth, unless we intentionally plan for it, won't come easy. So I think as we think those have historically been the 2 primary funding sources we have, we know they're both going to remain under pressure as we move forward. So what does that really mean for us is what I think about. This chart takes some of our high-level assumptions and rolls them forward over the next 5 years. And so as you look at the chart, what we're doing is we're just saying if we assumed 1% new annual enrollment growth, 2% inflationary tuition increases, flat to declining state support, flat employee headcount, and a 2% salary merit pool. If we If we roll that forward over a 5-year period on our operating fund, when you get to 2023, we have a $160 million recurring operating gap. And so I just want to highlight that because it's really important that we understand that, and I think what PwC is going to present shows that we have an opportunity to reduce that gap. But if we think the work we're doing here is the solution to solving that, it's going to take more than that strategy, but this will be a key part of that. When we think about it, what are the things that we can do? So one is productivity, increased enrollment, and operational efficiency. I think that coupled with innovation and academic excellence, those will be the things that actually allow us to drive forward and close this gap. So we will be taking this head on. I don't want anyone to read this and think this is where we plan to head. This is just saying if you chose to do nothing, this is where you could end up. So I just want to provide this as some context. For this last slide before I turn it over to Margaret, this just reinforces some of the trends that we're seeing across the national landscape. I think I'll go to the last point here on driving investment needs. I think I've said it before, but there's a number of CFOs that have been quoted as there's resources for strategic needs. As you've seen on the previous slides, clearly are not going to come from new revenue sources. They're going to come from reallocation. And I think as we go through prioritization, we have to understand that every decision we make to do something, we're also going to be choosing not to do something when we make those decisions. So those are some of the key things that will be changing. With that, I will turn it over to Margaret, and she will go through a summary of the assessment. I think you had the 160-page report in your materials. Margaret and Breck will present, and then we'll have questions afterwards.
So thank you very much. Thank you, President and Board of Curators. And it's been a pleasure working with the administrative team, your executive team here. So again, Margaret Stover with PwC, and I have the fortune of leading PwC's higher education advisory practice for the country. And what I wanted to express to you as an opening comment is the issues around higher education, as Mr. Rapp outlined for you, are throughout the country. You know, the business imperatives around return on investment, quality of the output that you put in, your innovation and risk mitigation are the areas that we think institutions really need to focus on. And those you certainly have rallied to the cause, and you're focusing on them for your organization as a whole. And what's also equally important, being a public institution, is making sure that those investments are being made and the resources are being used as good stewards of taxpayers' dollars, but also focusing on student success and their families, and making sure that the faculty are reinvested in and the programs are reinvested in is critically important as well. So I wanted to share those as opening comments for you. So around the assessment that was completed. So we completed an 8-week assessment utilizing an amount of information that, quite frankly, has been pulled together by your institution over the past couple of years. Your institution has not been sitting dormant. It has been looking at its operations, has completed studies, has been implementing many different activities to try to address the cost situation that your organization has in front of it. We completed 70 interviews, a bulk of them at the system office level, at the MU campus level, but also we did a couple interviews at the other campuses as well. So solicited a lot of input with respect to the priorities of the organization, how it operates, where there's opportunities. Completed a lot of data analysis, as you can imagine, and that information used information that was from your general ledger, payroll files, past studies, and from that information we're able to quantify a list of opportunities, vet them with your leadership, modify them as appropriate given feedback and areas of focus, and then we are presenting them to you today. And what again I want to focus on is the fact that from a management perspective, you have been working on administrative efficiency improvement. And so part of our challenge as your consultants was to try to understand in the data analysis side of it, how much of the noise in the data actually had been addressed already. And let's try to pull them out from an opportunity perspective so that we're not already accounting for things that are in place, but really try to find the details of things that can be implemented moving forward. So from the study, the outcome of the study, the work that needs to be done includes, as mentioned, a design around an operating model. And as the president mentioned, there's 2 operating models that have been discussed. That's the real work that needs to be encountered. So we've been able to identify a quantitative study and where there's opportunities, but from there, that work needs to involve stakeholder engagement, faculty and students, some additional data analysis in order to really put a pinpoint on the quantified opportunities. So in terms of the scope of the study, so our work involved looking at administrative costs in 4 concrete areas: finance, IT, HR, and facilities, at your system office level and at your MU campus level. And so we looked at 20% of your spend for the university as a whole, and that did include benefits. And benefits was a very large portion of that spend that we looked at. It was about $644 million of spend that we evaluated, of which over 60% of that was the benefit factor. And as you can see on the slide how it broke down by functional area. Some observations for you. So first and foremost, one of the observations that we shared very quickly with your leadership was the fact that work has been underway and there's acknowledgement that things do need to change. There's acknowledgement that in order to take the organization forward and make it stronger and accomplish all the goals, there's things that can be done to allow a reallocation of resources to the areas of significant priority for the organization. But also, one of the things that we observed for you, which again I don't think was a new finding at all, was the fact that you do operate in a very distributed and siloed manner. And as a result of that, there's different processes in place, different ways that the business units operate, and that results in inconsistency in business processes. Quite frankly, results in waste. So the opportunity to really standardize in some sort of consolidated way can free up resources to enable you to reinvest in other purposes. One of the things we also observed was the fact that you're very, very focused on the real and the now. You know, and because of your current situation, that does prevent you from focusing somewhat moving forward. And so being able to free your administrative team up from that type of activity so that you can progress the organization forward is critically an objective of the organization, and moving forward past this type of study will help you accomplish that. Your data and information is also, while very solid and good for accounting purposes, inconsistent. And so your finance team and management need to take the information and can't just instantly produce reports for you that give you the answers to questions that you're asking because of the distributed nature of your organization and how you've structured your data. And being able to have a robust financial analytical team to be able to give you the information you need is also something we are suggesting through this study. And the level of communication here is another very important part of your culture. You know, the transparency that you have undertaken here with respect to making sure individuals are engaged in this process, understand what's happening, communicating was a very important point made to your advisors at the very beginning and held throughout this process. That's going to take you miles down the road very quickly, because you don't need to come back in the future and explain to everybody why you're doing the study. They're being brought along. It does create some noise through the process, which as a board you have to listen to, but it does in the long run allow you to get to the solutions much more efficiently and at least much more welcomely than if things are done in a non-transparent fashion. So keys to success. As mentioned, changing the operating model is one of the key recommendations that are coming out of this study. Could you continue in the current operating model that you have? You certainly could. You would operate and graduate wonderful students and do innovation, as you heard reported earlier here. But if you want to be able to take your organization to a level to be able to reinvest in really strategic and differentiating factors, we're suggesting one way for you to be able to do that is to change your operating model, allowing you to focus much more of your resources in those areas rather than on some of the administrative areas, which is part of just doing business. And so we encourage you to think about that and look at that. With that, we feel that implementing a business office that will manage change is going to be important. We call it a transformation management office. You can call it a project management office, some sort of office that will be accountable to making sure that activities are moving forward, track activities, be able to report activities back, is also critical to the success of these type of projects. And so one of the things that we've talked with your leadership about is how do you structure that type of program in a system structure whereby you have systems that have, or campuses that have a lot of resources focused on conducting their day-to-day activities, and how do you have them complete the tasks at hand when they're trying to perform their daily business. So getting to the actual findings. So through this 8-week study, we were able to identify a range of $40 to $70-ish million of opportunity savings. Now, I would encourage you to not fixate on that number, because please do recognize, again, it was an 8-week study, and the details behind it, while very legitimate, need a much finer point, need deeper analysis, and you'll see an illustration as to why that is the case. But the bottom line is there's opportunity out there that you could take advantage of, and that's what we encourage you to think about. If you strip away the benefit component of it, because there are opportunities on the benefit side, if you strip away that component, there's a almost 30 million-ish to 40, little over 40 million-ish opportunity. Now this is opportunity again for the system office and the MU campus, and only in a very small way does it touch your other campuses. So I want to just bring that point to you. In total, we identified about 24 opportunities, and through those opportunities, they were vetted with your, what we call leads, functional leads, so your IT, facilities, HR, and finance leads, who we worked very closely with. Went back and forth around the numbers, went back and forth around the assumptions. So a very transparent process. So on the facility side, you can see the range of opportunity that's been identified. This is an assortment of ideas around rationalizing your external leases, looking at your footprint. You have some vacant space. How do you perhaps decommission some of that vacant space? Also includes things such as landscaping and changing up the way that you're doing landscaping. So we looked through the whole laundry list of facility type of functions. On the finance side, the major opportunity in the finance area is around the operating model. You have a lot of distributed FTEs, or people doing finance type of functions throughout the entire organization. And how do you really wrestle that back in some sort of way to enable you to have a finance function that's highly effective and getting you the information that you need, but also at the cost point level that makes sense for the organization. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. On the information technology side, again, this is the opportunities are around things such as coordinating and consolidating help desk, or desktop support, server support, pulling those back in a central manner, ideas around things of that nature. And then I'm going to have Brett speak to the human resources and benefit area.
Great, thank you, Margaret, and good morning. Breck Marshall, I lead our HR consulting business for higher education here in the United States. Everybody is working hard. That is clear. The question is, are we working smarter? When we looked at the HR information and with great candidness in the interviews and asked, well, who does HR work? Almost everybody's hand goes up. Then you ask who actually works for HR, and very few hands go up. Now, what that phenomenon is contributing to is you go down the hall to somebody who you presume is HR, providing advice and guidance on whether it's a family leave issue or an I-9 or what have you. They make a spot determination of helping you out. Turns out that process tends to get it wrong more than it gets it right. And as it works its way towards official HR, it has to be redone a number of times along the way. So the current way of operating is actually snowballing more work rather than less. And to give you a perspective on the numbers, roughly speaking, you have about 107 people officially carrying the uniform between system and campus in the HR function, just in the Missouri side. Having said that, 477 are hobbyists in the topic. That's a pretty big number. When we look at it in terms of our Saratoga benchmarks for best practices in HR, you go from world-class at 107 to well beyond the regular when we start looking at the numbers. So one of the things we came through in our report and working along the way with Marcia and the rest of the team was a different operating model by which you can get those points coordinated. Let's make sure the people who provide advice and guidance and do the work of HR actually are trained to do the work of HR. They know what the policies and the practices are. Going to the point that Margaret said that you folks are already doing some of this work right now, a current analysis of all the processes just taking place on the campus system-wide HR right now has 450 different process variations. Think of that, that's a lot to master as a single person. So, from an HR perspective, there is opportunity. There is also opportunity for investment. You have a 9.2 PeopleSoft system that you implemented, but there are new capabilities that can be put with it to provide self-service. I don't know about how many of you, but I don't go to a bank teller anymore when I go to the bank. Are there things that you can interact with when you think about with HR that can be done systemically or through easier interfaces and interfaces so that you can have some of the power yourself to handle the address change and other things and other components as part of that transaction? Most of us might be a little bit more of a control freak and might prefer that. So there are options there, or opportunities there that we looked at. Then on the benefit side, and I understand I'm on a live mic and this is a contentious issue. The point on the benefits is that the benefits that are currently in place, yes, there are opportunities to make changes and adjustments. Yes, you can save money in that process. Having said that, we'd suggest you take a step back and look at this in terms of an overall employee value proposition, because as you might want to make changes on those, you've got salary and the like, what really does it mean to work in this system? What are the compelling means from a financial standpoint and non-financial that make this the best place to work in all the education organizations out there? And coming to grapple with that at the price you can afford. Because at the end of the day, as you all well know, the world of education is rapidly changing. And the key is that every educator you hire and have has to count. And the question is, how do you get the value, the economics, and the support models and the training so that that training and capability can constantly deliver? And that's the perspective on benefits.
And then the last area to cover was supply chain. So we did a review of your contracts, your purchasing contract supply chain, and you have really good contracts. The opportunity in supply chain lies with choices among items selected in those contracts themselves. So do you need the Mercedes or should you get the Ford? You know, when you're out buying some items. So putting in place management rigor around the appropriate items, or do you really need the level of an item that you're purchasing, is where that opportunity comes from. So you've heard us talk about operating model a couple times through this presentation, and the president mentioned it as well. And so I'm not going to belabor the fact of you presently having this distributed operating model, which if it were to change could gain you efficiencies, standardization, better quality of work product. What I want to focus your attention on is the bottom section of this slide. And this gets to the point that we were making about the hobbyist, as Breck mentioned. The number of FTEs, or headcount, in this case headcount from the chart perspective, of individuals that are performing either IT, finance, HR, facilities type of work. And as you can see from the numbers on the table, within the UM and MU central functions, there's almost 1,000 headcount. We're estimating, and it is an estimate, within the MU campus alone, there's somewhere around an additional 2,300 heads, individuals, not FTEs because it's a part-time job, meaning they're a hobbyist, they're doing other things, but 2,300 individuals touching finance, HR, IT, and facilities in some way. And so 70%, we estimate 70% of your function is being performed at that distributed level. And that's the piece that we need to get to in the recreated operating model. Now, these numbers are estimates, and those estimates were driven by looking at your payroll information, the job titles of individuals, looking at your financial systems and transactions and who actually did general ledger entries or purchased, all the various functions as outlined in those areas, and came up with an estimate of the number. This is the next piece of work that needs to be really attacked, and we call this the activity analysis. It's really a detailed study that allows you to understand precisely who's doing what and what else are they doing. So as you work forward and reorganize into a new operating model, you understand not only who's doing what and how do you continue to service what they were doing, because that's critically important. This is not just about who's doing what. This is why are they doing it in the first place. There was a need, and so how do you make sure that need's met? And then how do you then implement this? And so we're launching the activity analysis, which will allow us to complete this analysis. So the final slide that I'll speak to is the point that's already been made around operating model. And it really actually is a bigger issue. So as with any change in an organization, when you begin to look at processes, you begin to look at who has what roles and responsibilities and accountabilities. And within your organization, as you've heard us say, you have a very distributed model. We're encouraging you to step back now and really think about the role of the system office and how and what should it be moving forward. That will enable you to then begin to design the ideal operating model for you. And as mentioned earlier, it's not one model that's rampant throughout the organization as the end product. It's what model is right for the business function and for the campus being specifically. So I'm going to hand this back over to Ryan to complete the presentation.
Thanks, Margaret and Breck. Just moving forward, as we think about our next steps, I think you've heard PwC highlight a number of things, but I wanted to just kind of go over the things we'll be doing, or actually some of the things we're already doing. The Transformation Management Office, I just want to be clear, that's going to be one of the next things we do. We plan to do that within the current resources we have. So that's not something that we're creating an additional function that wouldn't be done within the resources we already have. Also, we've talked about the activity analysis, the work for that, the groundwork for that is already being laid. So we've actually started working on that. That would also work with what we plan to do as far as integrating the work that's already underway at the other campuses. And so the activity analysis will actually cover all 4 campuses. It will not just be MU and UM system. And we're also going to take the results of this work and look at the work that's already occurring at UMKC, that's Missouri S&T, and UMSL, and integrate that. Then the other thing we're going to be doing also is there were a couple of near-term opportunities detailed in the report related to IT and procurement. We're moving forward with those as well. So with that, I'll just come back to reminding everyone that I think it's important we remember why we're doing this. It's not because we want to be the best at operational efficiency or the best at finance or HR or IT. These are all functions that, if we do well, support the mission. So it really is about how do we drive resources back towards the mission and our strategy. And I just want to remind everyone that that's why we're doing it. It's not, again, I've said this in several audiences, the end is not being the best at administration. It's just a means that allows us to help achieve and fund our strategy. With that, I'll open it up if there's questions, discussion.
Well,
Questions, comments?
There will be, 'cause
And that would
I have a
include
lot.
Price Waterhouse.
I have a question. You'd mentioned that 107 employees in HR would be best in class. Do you have any general ratios, whether it be by number of students to administrators, that you would hold out as best in class, or is there any rule of thumb?
There are ratios of, typically it's employees to HR, and on average, that's around 120, 126 is currently what's coming in. I say that with the word currently because of the advancements in new HR systems. With even another layer of automation, that number is probably going to drop.
One more, sorry, while I've got you.
Sure.
Do you have any other university systems that you would hold out as good benchmarks in terms of an operating model?
There are a number in the Northeast. There is one that's in central northern Michigan area, all who have gone down this path. Some, when executing change with highly intelligent individuals, have received a little bit of pushback. But at the end of the day, what's been interesting to see over the last 7 to 8 years is that the whole Ulrich HR shared service model operations have eventually been adopted. It's too hard to ignore the opportunities and the centralization opportunities that come with it and the efficiencies. And so everybody eventually gets there. The question is your own unique way of how.
Can I ask a question, please? The estimate on savings is 44 million to 74 million. How much of that do you believe is annual savings, and how much of that is one-time savings?
So that savings is an annual savings. It
The whole
does-
thing, 100%?
Yes.
Okay, well, I saw facilities, so I didn't know if some of that was kind of a one-time,
Yeah, no, that's jettisoning.
okay. 100% is annual.
Yes, and I think we're at the point, I want to provide some context for the numbers. When we think about these numbers, we're really at the point where I look at this and I go, is it 20 million? Is it 200 million? What we know is there's an opportunity there that's sizable. What we can guarantee you too is as we execute on this, it won't be 44 million and it won't be 74 million. I think it's really about, we've looked at this, we're at the point where we would say, we know we have an opportunity here that's worth pursuing. And I think as we go through that, we'll figure out what that is.
Thank you, and my point is, it looks to me like the bulk of this is annual, and that's what I want to hear. Thank you.
I'd like to make sure that I understand the context in which you've done this. You've titled this the Administrative Performance and Process Improvement, and that's a piece of the puzzle. We do have state funding. We do have philanthropic support. We do have increasingly public-private partnerships. Even if we were to achieve midpoint or maximum of 70 million in savings, the graph that you first put up, we still have to pay attention to the other 3 or 4 components of how we're going to go from good to great. Am I correct in saying that this is a piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, yes, that is spot on.
And if we don't do it, we'll never get there. That's fair to
Correct.
say that we're a little bit behind the curve on that. Maybe I shouldn't say behind the curve. We have a lot to gain from going through this analysis.
Correct.
So I really appreciate your distilling it today. Going through the full report, frankly, was a little difficult to understand. but you've made it simplified so even I can understand it, and I appreciate the work that you've done. And I was a little surprised when I saw the graph that showed very little savings in HR, and administratively that's true, but when you think about the benefits and how we might do better in terms of value for the employees and not rely on traditional benefits that maybe are no longer best practices, it turns out that about half of the administrative savings can be done and done not without pain, but with a better future. Is that a fair way to put that graph in context?
Yes. I mean, the key is nationwide, there's lots of discussions on benefits, and especially after successfully concluding open enrollment for probably everybody in this room. But having said that, there are things that you can do in there. There are others where, you know, a lot of wellness programs are being now part of their average day approach within HR and pushing and trying to get better cost savings out of your benefits program. So yes, the way you characterize it.
Well, you've done...
One comment, excuse me, on
Yes.
the HR identification side. That did include an investment in some HR core functions, and maybe you could speak to that?
Yeah, so there was elements around the PeopleSoft solution and things that I was talking about with respect to self-service. And so within the window of which we did the financial analysis, the savings we had were mitigated by asking for more dollars in certain areas, and also spending more on training so that the folks who do play the role of HR are very qualified and capable and know that what they're executing is on point. Now, once you make those investments and that happens, then you will see more of the savings over time.
So on one of your charts, you say identify and implement current leading practices, and you're bringing to us your national perspective from all of the educational institutions. Well, I just want to say I appreciate your bringing this to us, and I appreciate, you know, sometimes we get a little inbred when we're just talking among ourselves, but it's really great to have your insight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
You know, you have a sizable number in here on IT as to what you think we can save there. And I know we've had numerous discussions and comments from Gary Allen with regard to the complexity of the 4 campuses and all the different systems that are in place. And it sounded pretty daunting to me in hearing him talk as to how to integrate all this. Now, I assume you've had a lot of discussion with him about this, and he's heavily involved in this $4 to $8 million number that you're talking about?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
One of the pieces in that number is you are currently operating 4 student platforms.
Yeah.
And
So Gary, I don't know if you need a comment, but can you shake your head one way or another? You're buying into what we're talking about here?
Absolutely.
All right.
And they also, I think, I was gratified to see the extent to which they gave us credit for those things that we have already identified and have been working on, but there's additional opportunities for us to take advantage of.
So these numbers they could either be high or they could be low. I mean, it might be a $10 million.
And recognize that these are estimates that are based upon just the Columbia geography. This is Mizzou and the UM system offices only. It is not the entirety of the system that's incorporated into what they've estimated at this point.
Okay, so if we add the other campuses in, these numbers are really low then?
Correct.
Okay.
We're using system with a small s. This isn't the big S, David.
Correct.
So we can use that term?
We're going to have to define those words someday, but.
Can I ask another question? Staying on the IT, the percent distributed is only 14%, but again, that's head count. And we all know, and we've discussed quite a bit, there's 4 different PeopleSoft platforms. But there's also, I mean, there's a substantial amount of IT programs across the whole thing. You agree that, I mean, there's and Phil's touching on this, but
Not just HR.
I can't get my head around that as far as how much, I think that opportunity must be massive and complicated.
There's a lot of apps out there being supported. Now, IT has gone through in the last 2 years pulling back a number of resources centrally already. So that's why you're not seeing as many. There still are some, but that speaks to the work that's been done that I was referring to earlier.
In the pre-read materials that we got in our board packets, there were different timelines for implementation and risk levels associated therewith. I understand that the recommendation is to assess the other 3 campuses, but I'm wondering, in terms of Ryan's opening projections of doom and gloom in 2023, and time being of the essence, I'm wondering if there is a plan to implement portions of these recommendations like tomorrow, or if we're waiting until I don't mean obviously literally tomorrow, but as opposed to waiting until all the analysis is done to start making changes, or do we have a work plan to implement some of this sooner?
So I think that's a really great question, and the answer is it's not this linear process of we've got to go do all the study before we start taking some of the actions. I think if you get into the detailed work plan, there's certain things we're already going to be starting on. I talked about some of the near-term opportunities. So it will not move in this linear fashion. And the campus integration, I think, I don't want to say that they won't take a long time, but I think you could see on the timeline that's really here over the next 2 months that we're going to work on that, and really we're going to start with kind of a hypothesis-driven approach that would say, tell us what's different, why UMKC is different than the results we've already found. So I think some of that work will move much faster than the work we've done here. But I think that's a good point. I think we cannot just continue to analyze it. I think we need some action.
I would agree, and I don't know if the rest of the board members have an opinion on this, but I know I would like to see reports on the progress of this at every board meeting.
I would agree with that.
I would think so, and that could be part of a dashboard.
Yes.
Yes.
Could I ask something? I'm following up on Julia. This isn't the first time the university has undertaken this sort of review, and the others have come to nothing. They simply faded away. I think there was a similar review a decade ago. Do you know if that's right?
There was a similar, yes, that is correct.
And you can go all back to Barbara Ewing and Scope and Course, which is slightly different, but they've always come to nothing. And so my question to you and to Moon, and I think this is for discussion, not an answer right now, so I don't want everybody out here panicking when I say this, is what is the role of the board in helping to not just monitor but drive these changes? Because what we're talking about, whether we like to use the word or not, is disrupting the academic environment. And disruption, it brings on a lot of different contexts, and some of them are negative. I don't tend to view them that way. But what can we do working within shared governance but still drive this process as board members?
What is PwC in other schools?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. Let me try to answer it this way. This is a very honest look of where we are. Very honest look. And I really do applaud all of our campuses, the chancellors, and the board for launching into this study. The difference between this particular effort and previous efforts is that we are all bought into this. We're doing this not because we're being asked to do it. We need to do it to secure a university that we can be proud of. Right now, the future looks pretty dire when it comes to state resources. And if we're going to grow, we have to grow our own resources as well as reallocate the resources that we have. And this is a very important process. Now, the chancellors, and I'm looking at the chancellors, will all want some level of autonomy. Obviously, I would want autonomy if I'm a chancellor of a campus. But if we were to say to the chancellors and the faculty and the staff, through this exercise, we're going to release more money and resources for your priorities. It may be faculty and staff salaries. It may be more scholarships for need-based students, or investments in growing the research that all of the chancellors and the university community care about. So the role of the board is setting expectations of me and the chancellors and the general officers to say, we want to see significant savings that are through the elimination of inefficiencies and duplication, and we want to see that resource invested in the academic priority and keep us accountable. And you would like to see this at every board meeting. We would like to provide you with an update every board meeting, including the dashboard.
Let me follow up just a little bit on that to everybody at the podium. What are our plans? Because I don't know what the contract was with PwC, and I recognize services are expensive. Are we going to maintain an ongoing relationship on this? Are they just handing it off to us? How are we handling this?
They will be involved in the work analysis survey. I think as far as beyond that, we haven't stepped beyond that. I will offer this. I think we look at it, and from my vantage point, I sit here and I say, if we have to go spend money with an outside firm and we spend over a year or two, $1 million, $1.5 million with outside help to achieve, let's just assume even the low end of $44 million in recurring savings
every year.
Every year, I'll make that investment.
Well, and the other reason I asked that was it does occur to me, and we could put it on a dashboard, and I wouldn't do this without knowing the consensus of the board and the president, which we would discuss, but it seems to me that we may want to have these folks back here in 6 months for an honest assessment from PwC on where we have been and where we're going. Can I ask the PwC folks, is this something that you've done before, or how have you helped manage these sort of changes at with other clients?
The model that we think works most effectively is a coaching model. So, help do one, coach doing that one, and then allow then the coach to take over and do it. And so that's one of the ways that we set up that transition management office or transformation management office, is to work partners shoulder and shoulder and hip with your outside advisors, so they learn the tools, they learn the techniques, and put that structure in place, and then allow us to then hand it off quickly so that you can be running naturally. We do, on occasion, go back in and provide a third party, again, independent assessment against the objectives, and where do you stand, and give a report out with respect to that, and understand the circumstances perhaps when you went off variance and why you went off variance, so that quite frankly, your management can be held accountable, but also the board members can understand perhaps why something has not gone to plan.
And one final question, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln, you have to know where you've been and how you got to where you are to figure out where you're going. That was a very rough paraphrase. So I'm not trying to cast fault or anything on a system or a model or how this works. How did we get to this sort of duplication? And is this typical of higher ed? Is this a battle that is really kind of unique to the higher education institutions?
You stole my answer, actually. I was going to say, how did most universities get to the situation they are today? It's the nature of the business model that has grown up over the years in terms of higher education. It's been a very independent, autonomous type of business. And so, as such, needs arise in terms of completing a task. And so the individuals who need that task completed create resources and people to be able to accomplish that. So you are not out as an anomaly out there. You are with many, many similar organizations, both public and private. This is not only a public situation. You have a situation with your public funding, which also makes it a challenge. But we consult in the public, the private, the large, the small. Everybody's undergoing this. And then just one point to maybe put a frame of reference back. If you look at healthcare and what healthcare was going through 20 years ago and continues to go through today, the similarities are striking. A question of the value of healthcare that you get for as much as we spend in the U.S. All of those issues are very similar, and the need to rethink how healthcare is delivered is the same thing that higher education is being confronted with today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate what you all have done. I want to make just 2 points, and this is incorporating a little bit of what John was saying and myself. I think it is very important for us the entire university to understand this is a starting point. This is not an end point. Even if we can achieve these savings, we're not done with the job. The other thing, going to what John is saying, and where do we go with philanthropy? Where do we go with public-private partnerships? These people are looking to do business with the best in class. That's who they want to do business with. That's who philanthropists want to give to. That's who businesses want to do business with. And the reason that we have to achieve this, John, in my mind, and go further, is that we can't be the best in class given our current funding model and funding restrictions unless we can get this money and reinvest it both in our faculty and our research and the TPMC, and at the same time investing in accessibility for students who don't have the same resources as other students. And this is an enormous, tricky challenge that's going to take difficult decisions, and just to put an exclamation point on it, I don't know how we do it without being willing to be somewhat disruptive.
Change is difficult, so
But
hang
always
on.
possible.
I had one question of Margaret, somewhat of a follow-up to Curator Steelman's question. You have obviously worked with several universities, as you've indicated, who are facing the very same challenges, perhaps for different reasons, but the very same challenges. Are there universities you've worked with, particularly public universities, who have more successfully, as a result of your evaluation, addressed those challenges than others? And I wouldn't want you to identify them publicly here. But if we talk at some point, are there universities out there who have really been extremely successful in turning things around based on the assessment that you did for them, that we could communicate with and talk to and get a head start on what we plan to do?
There's a lot of examples out there where there's been definite success and a lot of lessons learned. The important message around the lessons learned is it wasn't, most of those are not situations where they gave up then. They stepped back a second, looked at what they were trying to accomplish, knew what was the goal in mind, and retooled it and continued forward. A lot of the challenges come around implementation. It's not the opportunity and finding the opportunity, it's having the right discipline, timeline, and involvement, and everybody messaging and understanding why it's important. If you don't hit those right at the beginning, then it becomes a challenge.
And I assume some have been more disciplined than others.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a last question?
Yeah, go ahead, Darryl.
Thanks, man. So Ryan, back to you. We've got a range of 44 to 74 million. Maybe you've already said this, but practically speaking, where will we be? Will we be closer to 44, closer to 74? Because as we look and we get reports back, we'd like to know, what's our ultimate goal, and what's our ultimate goal practically speaking.
So I think as we move through this, what we can kind of keep track of is what's been achieved. As I was kind of saying before, that's the range based on, I think it's directional at this point. When we move through the activity analysis, I think we'll be able to put a finer point on that and refine the range. And I wouldn't be surprised if that range shifts when we do that as well. But I think one of the things we could do is for a dashboard type of report is keep track of, as we work towards those goals, what's been achieved. Is that what you're kind of looking for when we report back?
Because we need some guidance if we're going to be looking at a target. It'd be nice and it'd be nice to know.
You're fixated on 74, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if that's the best thing practically. We've got a report here, but I'm not sure if we've looked and said, okay, is this practical or not? So that's what I'm asking you, to be fair, because if we say we're expecting 74 and we're not getting it, I don't want to, be disappointed if you guys say we just couldn't get there because of whatever reason.
Well, but I think we've got to set a target and a goal, and we'll go try to achieve that. And I think Margaret kind of touched on that. As you go through it, you'll realize, okay, well, what we thought was once an opportunity no longer is, but along the way too, you might find something you say, this was an opportunity we hadn't thought of. But I agree. I think probably next time we come back, we could say, I just want to be careful when we define that target, that we're not saying we definitively know it's there, but we're just going to say, hey, this is the goal we're working. What's the goal?
So
I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Thank you all for this presentation, and going to John's point, there's lots of levers we have to pull here, and so you have these 4 quadrants: academic excellence, resource utilization, and revenue enhancement. And is PwC engaged on finding levers to pull within each one of those sections, or where are we in the other 4, or the other 3, if that makes sense?
So that's why we've got the box around the operational efficiency.
Yeah, today's operational.
So
where are you on the other
PwC is helping us with the operational efficiency. With the academic excellence, I know the provosts, the chancellors are working on their academic program reviews. I know there's a lot of good work occurring at UMKC and MU right now. I know we have some outside partners helping us with that. It's not PwC, but we do have some outside expertise. There's a lot of work on the resource utilization. So I'm just kind of giving you this off the cuff. Revenue enhancement, from our traditional sources, it's our most challenging. I think that's where pricing flexibility for different programs, if we think about also then just different recruitment strategies. When I look at that chart I showed you, I mean, the 3 things that I think we can move the needle on is not just enrollment growth for the sake of enrollment, but strategic enrollment growth, operational efficiency, and then academic excellence. I think those are the 3 main things that we can pull. The rest of the things that we assume in that model, I think, are largely fixed.
Thank you. I didn't know if we had engaged PwC on the other quadrants, and got it. Operational efficiency.
Yeah.
Let me ask, will we get an update from you at our February meeting in Columbia?
Yeah, I think what I've heard is the board would expect that we provide a standing update.
Good.
Yes. Moon?
So going back to Curator Chapman's question, we should set a target, but also we should have the perspective saying that academic excellence should also be a driving force. We can reduce cost. We can reduce cost by increasing the teaching load. We can increase cost by increasing the student-to-faculty ratio. But we don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense when it comes to academic excellence. But if there's duplication across the system and within the campuses, we're going to look at those very, very carefully to help succeed in academic excellence.
You said it much better than me. And that's what I meant by practicality of
That's
it,
right.
without sacrificing something else. What's reasonable? Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Margaret, Brett, thank you so much. Ryan, I want to particularly thank you and your staff and your colleagues for taking the initial efforts to get this assessment done. It's been extremely valuable, very helpful to us, and I think you can see from the comments by the board that this is something that we do want to, as a board, monitor going forward and be kept informed, but we're sure that'll happen. Well, as I look at the agenda, next item on the agenda is an action item, and that is pursuant to the bylaws of the Board of Curators. At this meeting, we elect a new board chair and a new board vice chair. So, fellow curators, at this point, I would entertain a nomination for the position of chairperson of the Board of Curators for 2018.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, everyone. Fellow curators, I would like to make a motion to nominate Curator David Steelman to be our chairperson going into the fiscal year 2018. I think we have a lot of challenges and opportunities, and Curator Steelman is the one to help guide us into the next year. On my time on this board, he exuberates the ability to build consensus amongst us all, but also keep a pace of doing business and holding us all accountable, and the president as we move into the new year. All of that being said, I really do appreciate Curator Steelman. This is difficult because Curator Graham or Chairman Graham, you are wonderful. I think you exemplify You're the living body of character, and you have done such a great job to serve us all in this difficult year and build excitement and morale as this team that I truly see us. So I want to thank you so much for your service in 2017.
Thank you, Curator Farmer. Is there a second to the nomination?
I second the nomination, and in doing so, I do that in the hope and the full expectation and confidence that Curator Steelman will continue to work in the statesman-like fashion that Chairman Graham has worked in, using his facilitative skills. I know he's a tiger of a lawyer. I know he's a good legislator, and I've seen his facilitative skills at work and come to respect him in the 5 years that 4 years, I guess, that I've worked with him. And I think he'll make a great chair.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, I would ask that you call the roll, Cindy. All in favor of the nomination of Curator Steelman as the next chairperson?
You want to do roll call vote or just call for ayes?
Let's do a roll call. I think everybody wants to be on the record.
Curator Burnsick?
Yes.
Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Farmer? Yes. Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes?
Curator Steelman?
I'm going to abstain because it has become traditional for the person nominated to abstain, which I think is emblematic of how we should operate building consensus, and that it's not a political operation or a political race.
Curator Sunvolt?
Yes.
Nomination is adopted, and congratulations, Curator Steelman. Next. Next item on the agenda is the election of a vice chairperson for the year 2018. Or is there a nomination for a vice chair for the upcoming year?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to place into nomination, it's my honor to place into nomination the name of Darrell Chapman. I think Darrell is a man with a lot of intellect. As we all know, he's got a wonderful personality. He gets along with all the curators in a wonderful fashion. But in addition to that, he's big enough that he can corral our chairman at the appropriate time. And I can't think of anybody else that could do that on this board.
We'll be the judge of that.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I place into nomination the name of Darrell Chapman as to be our vice chairman for the coming year.
Thank you, Curator Snowden. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that, and I just want to say that over the last 8 months that I've got to know Curator Chapman, he has done a tremendous job, and I have a massive amount of respect for him.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, I would ask Cindy you call a roll call vote on the nomination of Curator Chapman for vice chair.
Curator Burnsick?
Yes, and congratulations.
Curator Chapman?
I'll abstain, similar to Mr. Steelman.
Curator Farmer? Yes. Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes?
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Sunvolt?
Yes.
All votes in favor.
Nomination is adopted, and congratulations, Darrell. At this time, it is the tradition that I, as chair, and incoming chair, Curator Steelman, will go to the podium.
You know, Curator Farmer, you stole my thunder a little bit. When I had just graduated law school, my father, and I was starting up my practice in the small town of Salem, Missouri, and my father rode the circuit, an outstate circuit, and he used to try to give me fatherly advice and guide me what lawyers to avoid, who are the great lawyers, who are the ones that are not so good. And he had two lawyers in particular that he would always bring up to me. One was his dear friend, Jerry Schnapp, who was Marcy's senior partner. But early on, I remember him talking to me about Maurice Graham. I don't think he ever called you Marcy, about Maurice Graham. And what he always said about him, he was not just a great lawyer, but he always talked about his personal qualities and his integrity. And his dad's highest compliment was that his word was good. It was always good. My wife has a way of describing Marcy. She says he's a noble person. And if you look up the definition of noble, has a couple, but it means having the highest personal qualities and aspiring to high moral ideals and principles. To me, Marcy, you are the embodiment of nobility. But it's not fair to just stop with his personal qualities, because you have to talk about his impact and his impact on this board. I really only think there's a few of us who understand how far we've come. Phil, John, me and Marcy. And we understand the impact that you've made, Marcy, changing this, the culture of this board, the way we do business, the innovation, the creativity, the debates that we have really been made possible by your leadership. And so I think it is impossible to overestimate going forward the impact you've had, not just on this board culture, but on the impact throughout the university and the state of Missouri. And it's not just on the board, it is the way you've lived your life. And it is just such an honor for me to be on the board with you, but a particular honor to give you this, which is just a bare token of our appreciation for your leadership.
Well, thank you, David, and fellow curators. It has been an honor and a rare privilege for me to serve as chair for a year, but I'm not done. I still have 3 more years on the Board of Curators, and I look forward to serving with our great board. Many of you who are not fortunate enough to be with us when we meet and talk and visit about the importance of our duties and responsibilities as a member of this board, may not fully understand how committed this board is to trying to do our job as best we can and to move this great university, its 4 campuses, to the next level. In talking about the Board of Curators, it's a bit interesting to learn about the history of the board. You know, it's back in 1878, February of 1878, when this university was formed, that it was formed in Columbia, Missouri, one little campus. Columbia at that time was 700 people. There were only 3 platted streets. Those were the 3 streets on either side of Broadway. That was Columbia, Missouri. And this little university was formed under the Geyer Act and has grown into the 4 campuses we have now. I tried to figure out how many members had served on the Board of Curators up through the current time, and it's impossible, but it has to be somewhere between 500 and 800, somewhere in that area, because the board has not always been 9. It was 15 initially, then 18, then 22, back to 18, and then finally down in the 1870s to 9 members of the board. But there have been different ways that boards have been appointed, but it's been for many, many years appointments by the governor, and all of us are so proud to have received that honor. But in talking about the privilege of serving as a member of this board, you have to talk about what our responsibility is. And that's why it's so important to me and so exciting for me to work with the board that is committed to making this university as good as we can make it. We have had challenges, and we've talked about the challenges. And we've talked about the challenges this morning. The challenges of former curators have been different. In the 1870s, curators were required by the governor to take an oath of office to the Union, and those that didn't were removed. 15 curators of the 18 were removed. There was a period of time about then later, 4 or 5 years later, when the university shut down for lack of funds during the war between the states. Well, we haven't faced those kinds of challenges, but we faced different challenges. And I'm excited, even after hearing this report this morning, to work on those challenges as we move forward. And it is traditional that at this time in our meeting that the outgoing chairman of the board present to the incoming chairman of the board this history book by Jonas Fines. Jonas Fines came here to Missouri back in early 1900s to become a history professor at University of Missouri. He taught history here for 45 years. And in 1939, he wrote a history of the first 100 years. And this book is presented with great pride to me today to David Steelman, my good friend David. We go back longer than most people realize. But to present to David to take care of until he turns it over to the next chair. And each chair signs his or her name in there at the end of their service. I've signed my name this morning, and when you go out of this chair, you'll sign your name. And it is a tradition that the outgoing chair reads something from that book. And I'm only going to read a small part of that book, but it's really the last few words of that book, written by Jonas Fines. May the University of Tomorrow, talking about our university, our great 4 campuses, may the University of Tomorrow, through building constantly upon the solid foundation laid in the past, continue to merit the confidence and the loyal support of the great state it serves. And the only thing I would add to that is we not only serve this great state of Missouri, we serve as Board of Curators. We serve many of these people right here, the great leaders of our university. We serve the taxpayers. We serve those who benefit from our research. And most importantly, we serve those wonderful students who depend upon us to provide a university that will allow them to change the world. So, congratulations.
Don't worry, my remarks are going to be brief. There's a couple things I want to say on this as we face the challenges going forward. And the first is I want to talk about this board. And we have a remarkable opportunity to remake this institution. And by remaking this institution, remake higher education and help guide improvements and advances in the state of Missouri. A remarkable opportunity. To do that, we're going to have to be bold, but we can't be brash. I think I know in different respects the members of the board and the leadership, and we have some not bright, brilliant people. I have to say that Moon Choi is one of the most impressive leaders that I've ever met. And of course, Marcy, as you all know, has kind of been a hero of mine for years. But none of us individually can do this. And if we think we have all the answers, we don't. We need each other. We cannot be successful with each other. We cannot be successful without listening to each other and listening to these leaders. See, Moon, I understand shared governance better than you think I And if we do that, and which is what I want to say this, in going forward, what I would like to do, and in my short-term plans, I'm hoping to have a meeting with Moon and Cindy and Marcy and Daryl, who just to come up with some ideas for what we can accomplish this year and then get them out to the whole board. Because we have to make these decisions as a board. And if we're making these decisions right, John Phillips, we may have a few split votes, but I firmly believe that the best answers are usually the path of collaboration between competing strong opinions. Now, that may not always be, but that's been what my experience has taught me. I was going to say that I had a vision, which is what we're working to, except we have to do that through shared governance. So what I've really got is just an idea, an imagination, a dream maybe. I really see in the not too distant future this university being a university where 4 campuses are attracting students from not just every part of this state, but from every part of the world who are coming to our campuses and our university because they know that they can get a world-class education, a mind-bending, life-altering education that challenges the very best and brightest in the world. And I believe strongly that at the same time, they're coming to our campuses because we're going to figure out the key to making sure that our campuses are accessible to men and women from every walk of life. It doesn't matter who their parents were. It doesn't matter if they can write that check. We're going to figure out a way to unlock the key to excellence and accessibility, and by doing that, we will change this state. Now, if I can just go a little farther on my dream and just go to one campus for a minute, I see a national championship, Phil. But in addition, what I see in that same year when we're going to celebrate that national championship, which is just as important or more important, we're going to see the Nobel Prize awarded to one of our researchers who takes advantage of the research opportunities that we create through our translational precision medicine building. That is what I believe that we can achieve for the University of Missouri, working together, working with Moon, with the chancellors, and working together and listening. So I'm looking forward to the journey.
Thank you, David, and I can assure you that we look forward to that journey with you. You're going to have our prayers, our support, and we're going to work hard to accomplish what you've described. And I might add that as we go forward, we're going to do the right thing for the right reasons and move this university ahead. The next item on the agenda is any thing for the good and welfare of the board. Hearing none, we will now close this meeting and go into recess for an executive session, but we would be remiss if we, and I'll do this on behalf of the board, did not here at the end of this year 2017 thank all of you great leaders out there who are here this morning, who are out there making your campuses and the system better. And you have our commitment that we as a board are going to do everything to help you accomplish your respective missions. So to each of you, have a wonderful holiday, and we'll get back to work in January. Just recessing. We're going to executive session shortly.